Good day, good day, good day. This is Mr. Anderson. Have a question. Is there a certain way to do things? And who's in charge of that certain way? I was thinking about that. And actually, my dream I had last night touched on that a little bit. Is we all have a certain way of doing things and a certain way of how we want to live. Yet we're limited in control. I think we're limited in that control, yet can we change that? And all the books that I've listened to, they all touch on that. You know, you have to eat a certain way, think a certain way, act a certain way. All that. You have to do that a certain way. Yet, what is that certain way? And I wonder if it depends. To me, it depends on the individual. It depends on your purpose. It depends on your alignment. It depends on the systems. And that's where I do think that a lot of that certain way is installed in us through education, through work, through supply and demand. And when I say supply and demand, it's the way we live, the way the housing, the cars, with that. So when do we take control, or can we take control of that? And I really, a lot of that really, for me, that I think it starts within. It starts with self. It starts with understanding who you are, what your purpose is, what you're aligning yourself with. Because I think everyone needs a balance, or I think everyone needs to understand a certain way, in a certain way. I mean, it's crazy. Like, things can be controlled, how things are controlled, and the systems that are used to control those things. And it all really trickles down on us and how we live and how we live. How we do things in a certain way. And I think a lot of things are distractions. I think a lot of stuff is distractions. And that creates a certain way of thinking, a certain way of buying, a certain way of living, a certain way of responding, a certain way of feeling. I remember reading a book, and it talked about gaming and all these violent games and these headshot games, army games, that is desensitizing feeling, emotions. And some of that you do see, like some of these younger generation don't care. They don't have a feeling. It's just, but then that's being a product of your environment. If you come from a rough neighborhood, you're not gonna care. You just you're just there to survive in a certain way. If you come from a rich, wealthy area, you have more. Your certain way changes because of the influences you have around you and the people and the opportunities around you can help dictate that certain way of living for you and yourself. So can we change that? I do think you can. I think it's hard. Like I'm in a process of doing that. I'm always going to be in a process of doing that. But I have changed the way I've thought. Over the years, I can tell the change in my mind. And that's one of the things that I battle with, because I see things differently because of the certain way that I think and a certain way that I act and a certain way that I expect my life to be and have, and that certain way changes. That stuff changes continuously, and that's due to distractions or stuff evolving. It's a non-constant cycle of systems that's cycling and changing. So one of the things that was saying that I remember hearing in my book, I was walking last night and I was going back on my book, and they were talking about a certain way. It was like rich people don't study poor people to make them rich. Some rich people do, but then again, rich people do study poor people, but it makes them get rich. There's a difference. There's a difference in that certain way of thinking and certain way of logic, because it's all come from, the having or abundance, or it's just a certain way. But you have to have that instilled in you. And I was listening to a podcast or something, like a little bit of it last night, and they were talking about how the economy is changing, and it's ever changing, and we can't do things a certain way that we did it back in the day. Like you have to nowadays, and I've said this, you almost have to have a second source of income nowadays. And they were talking about how people moving to certain areas that you're causing like an influx of people moving. Like for instance, here in Nashville, the cost of living has skyrocketed. The apartments are, I remember having a 1-bedroom apartment 10 years ago, and it was $600, and that was for the fireplace. It was like $650, $675, and that was for the fireplace, upgraded countertops. Yeah, it was in Antioch or Laverne. Antioch. It was in Antioch. Yet that still was like, feasible. And plus the money I was making at the time, and I didn't know anyway, because I didn't understand a certain way. This is what I'm given, this is what I have. And then I remember after that going, being in a relationship and then getting out of a relationship and going back, and that same apartment was like $1,100. 10 years later. 10 years later. And then it's like, wow. And I'm like, I'm not gonna pay $800. It was like, I think it was like $800. It was almost $1,000. And I was like, I'm not gonna pay. But that's a certain way. That's controlled. But that's also with that influx of people moving in Nashville. and the certain powers that be that have a certain way that they want things to run, and cities making themselves presentable in a certain way to get more businesses to move in town, and corporations and tax dollars and all this stuff. It changes the certain way we live, and it changes the certain way we have to be in creative survival mode. You have to be able to do that. And I see some of these other cultures that's here or moved here, or these other races of people that move here and come here, and they'll be 3 families in a household, 4 families in a household. They're used to that certain way. They're used to living that certain way and being that certain way. And I think that to me, that seems like, from my experience, it seemed like it's made them closer in that aspect of things. It's like they're more willing to help each other out. So can we change a certain way that we live? Can we change a certain way that we think? And I think it's hard. I know it's hard because of the distractions. Football season coming up. Distraction. Don't get me wrong, I love football. I love watching football. Yet I'm not one of those that I gotta, argue about the team and argue about who's the best player and trading and all that. I could care less about all that. What I care about is getting my brand in the stadium. That's what I care about. That's what I care. How can I put my name or my brand or my ideas into that stadium to help my certain way, help me in my certain way. That's what's like, man, that's what I'm looking at when I'm around. But that's just the way I think. That's just the way I am. I see that stuff as, like to say, this is for entertainment purposes only. They should start the NBA games and football games and basketball games and the concerts. They should start that off with that. This is for entertainment purposes only, because it is. And that's how I'll see it. That's how I'll see it. But that's just me being in that and understanding that and going through that and sitting with myself, sitting still in movement, which is, I was thinking about that the other day. It's like when I was walking, I was like, man, we really have to sit still, but we also have to move. And one of the things that I noticed, I was walking, I was doing my walk, and I was watching people walk. They had their phone in their hand. I'm like, how are you walking and you watching your phone? You watching the video? Like, I get it. Thank you, but that's to me, that defeats the purpose in a sense. Yeah, that's just the certain way that folks do things. And that's when I learned I can't allow myself to get caught up in other people's certain way and get distracted from my certain way. I need to count how many times I said certain way. But I want y'all to hear that. What is it? What certain way are you living? We're all wanting cheaper rent. We're all wanting cheaper car payments. We're all wanting cheaper, to be able to save. We all want ways to do things, and there's a lot of creative ways to survive, and yet a lot of us are just exhausted from putting in all this work all these years, And a lot of times that work and that effort it's been done in a way that it's draining. It's drained us. And we're tired. I'm tired. You know, the times that I was able to work from home, like I seen how much more energy I had or I have when I work from home. It's like, man, I'm energized because I'm driving in traffic. And me driving most of my life, half of my life, you know, it's draining after a while. And then the traffic, and then had a guy cut me off yesterday. Well, not he cut me off. He was behind me, and we were in traffic, and he gonna go around me. Granted, I was in the lane next to the fast lane, the fastest lane, HOA lane or whatever that lane is, but I was going the speed of the traffic, and he gonna get behind me and get mad and come around me and give me the finger. So I had to mess with him. And I know he called me all kind of names, but it was funny. It was funny. It was funny. But like, you can't change. You're speeding up to go nowhere because it's traffic. You're gonna cause an accident. Why? For what? Where are you in a hurry to get to? Nothing's that serious to me. But my children. Now, if I'm getting to my children, yes, I'm gonna dip and dodge, but I'm gonna get there. And that's part of me learning through driving trucks is I gotta get there safe. It's a certain way. Yeah, they can push me to get there. You're gonna be on time. And yeah, I'm gonna get there. I've planned my way. I planned my route. I have a certain way of things the way I do things, and that's it. And I battle with that sometimes at work. You know, that certain way. Everybody has their own certain way, yet one guy is pushing his certain way on everybody else, and I'm not going. I'm going to take my time. I have a certain way of things that I do, and I let them know that. Like, look, man, I have a certain way of things, that certain process that I go through to help me. What helps me don't help you, might not help you. You willing to show me the way you do things? I'm all ears, and I will see if that certain way helps me. And I'm always the type of person that I would take a blend of things, a few things from here, a few things from here, a few ideas, and I'll try it out. That's what I'm always creating. That's my brain is always figuring stuff out. And that's why I would tell my son, whenever I start a new job or a new thing, I'm learning how to do that job the way they taught me, that certain way. But then I'm also finding a certain way that works for me in the same sense. And sometimes I'm always looking for a better, faster, easier, economical, easier, certain way of doing things. I'm always looking for that. Yet I have to slow my mind down because I master things real fast. I master things real fast that it causes me to get bored sometimes. So I have to challenge myself. And speaking of that, there's one of the books that I read that I love. I might have to go back and read it. It was about Michael Jordan and how he would create certain ways in his head to be like dominate folks. And it was one that he was talking about that he went to a game and he was like, I had to find something to motivate me. And he told a dude that, yeah, man, I heard what you said about my mama. And dude was like, I didn't say nothing about your mama. What you talking about? And he scored like 45 points that game or 50 points that game because he used his certain way to give him access, a different access of his higher self, and also kind of distract that guy from his certain way. And it's crazy. Like that was nuts. And they call, I'm not gonna say debate about who's the greatest basketball player of all times, but man, that man was a great thinker. You know, other than the athletic ability, he was a great thinker. And people look besides that, Tom Brady wasn't the greatest athlete, but he was a great thinker. These athletes used their certain way to create a way to play. That's deep. They used their certain way for a way to play, a way to survive, a way to give their life longevity. And when he went to play baseball, that was his certain way of like, man, this is something I want to do. I've mastered this game. Let me move on. Because it's something I've always wanted to do. And I feel that because I love baseball. I love baseball. Because I grew up, that was what helped me grow up. And then those certain way of things that I've done in those years helped mold me in this certain way now. And we really have to take somewhat of control of what we have control over. The numbers are not going to lie. I mean, certain things, you know, we can't change. We could only, and that's why I was telling my son, be proactive. You know, life is going to happen whether you're ready for it or not. I would rather be ready for it than not ready for it. That's what I would say. There's certain things that I would rather have on me and with me than I wouldn't, that I really need, that I'm glad that I have on me and with me. I'd rather have it than not have it. Even if I ever have to use it, I'd rather have it. Because I know that's a tool, and I talk about tools a lot. You know, certain tools, you have to have the best tools. You have to have the best certain way of doing things to do that. And can we change that? That was my question. Can we change that? It's hard. Yeah, it's going to take time. Yet we could do it. And that's one of, and I know this is probably a shameless plug, but it is what it is. Why I created my system, because I was like, I need a tool to help me change a certain way that I think. I need something that I can do that can help me stay undistracted and live a certain way and be a certain way. And yet it's hard. I get thrown off my alignment. Yet I get right back on, you know, and that's normal. That's one thing I love about meditation. They say, you know, when you meditate, don't cast off that thought. Think about it real quick. Get it out your mind so you can be free. Don't let it go. Think about it. We have to put more effort in thinking in a certain way and doing a certain thing. Man, I can go on and on about this. Like, I love to think. I love to create. You know, and I'm trying to change because of my certain way. I'm going to be able to help my children find their certain way. Give them access to higher standards of tools, or not higher standards of tools. Yeah, that's what I should say. Higher standards of tools are better tools, are better resources, and to do that. And I know one of my things is I'm not really a people person per se. I have my moments. I'm old school. I like being in the presence of people. I like us sitting down outside, cooking, grilling, eating, or playing call, doing something, the presence of people. I'm not a phone person. I don't want to sit on the phone. I can't. I don't do that. And I know some way I need to do that because technology has changed. But anyway, but anyway, like I said, I'm learning my certain way. I'm changing my certain way. Y'all be easy, man. Y'all tell me what y'all think about that. Change a certain way. Think about your certain way. You know, your certain way you work at work. The certain way you get up in the morning. The certain way you brush your teeth. The certain way you drive. The certain way you cook. The certain way, you know, that you do. And which certain ways give you the best overall feeling and effort for yourself. This is Mr. Anderson, man. This is good. Y'all be easy.